All right, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us. Welcome back to our webinar series, Embracing Change. We've got Diana Chambers out of Switzerland, who had an interesting trip back from London, which I'm sure at some point today we'll share. Thank you, Diana, for being with us. Thank you for taking the time early this morning in Switzerland, in the mountains. How's the weather? Is it still cool and refreshing, or is it getting a little warm now?
It was warm, but this morning it's completely overcast. But this is mountain weather. You can never guarantee what will flow. So today, not so clear.
All right, so I'm really excited to really delve into your new article. I mean, to me it's a little booklet. I would say it's 51 pages, so I would say it's more than an article. It's decades and decades of your love and unique gift and your personal experience of relationship with money and how that played out in your own family and your own experience yourself. And Money Wisdom Unlocked is, this is the next piece after your beautiful book that we spoke about last time when we did the webinar together. So, it'll be fun to kind of move through, and just kind of begin with, something. Why did you want to do this? Like, what was going on? What were you experiencing that you decided that I need to put this out there? Like, what drove that?
Thanks, Faisal. Well, I'll just give a little short background as to how I'm in this space anyway, and then what occurred for me to want to add this piece. So my background is that I was educated to be financially successful. I went to University of Edinburgh, did junior year abroad at the Wharton Business School, and I moved into the nonprofit world after doing almost a decade in my 20s in strategic planning. And I earned a minimal salary when I was in the nonprofit world. I really wasn't concerned about it because I knew I was going to inherit from 2 family-owned businesses. Okay. But I was in for a rude awakening, because when the inheritance experience happened, I asked to be bought out about 25 years ago. I had to negotiate with my sister over one business and my dad over the other one. And my dad offered me 20% of the value of my holding, which he said is what minority shareholders would get. And I negotiated and got a higher percentage.
Do you mind sharing what percentage you finally got, or is that?
I finally got 45. Still
wow, low. Really? From your
Yeah.
own father? Wow, I'm sure you did a lot of energetic work to let go of that one.
Well, that's the point, Faisal. It was a long journey to figure out how could my dad have been so punitive, really, with me over this, and what did it mean, and was I a member of the family? He referred to me as a minority shareholder, which was true. I was a minority shareholder, but I was also a member of the family. So I had to really give that a tremendous amount of reflection, and the outcome of that for me was, I wish there had been someone there to help me through this. I mean, I had friends, I had people who were very financially astute, but I needed someone who could really make sense of this for me in that process and partner with me in it. And so that's the genesis of the wealth mentoring side of my practice. I'm also a philanthropic advisor, but this is the wealth mentoring piece. And I felt I would really like to help to provide that sort of resource and presence for people going through any financial experiences that they were finding challenging. So I started the practice, the wealth mentoring side, in about 2005. So I've been doing this for a long time now. And parallel to learning about my own financial path, I've also been on a path of personal development, spiritual development. Okay. And it's really caused me to reflect on how consciousness and how aware we need to be of what's playing out. And what I will often say to other professionals is we cannot help our clients until we've done the work ourselves.
Exactly.
So,
eat your own dog food, experience your own. Like for us, anybody that's going to join the team, I have the experience first, obviously not the surgeries, but all the other pieces that you're referring to, because if it's not good enough for me or my loved ones, why would you, go through that? So I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. So the more recent part of my journey has been working with a wonderful teacher called Thomas Hübl,
Yes.
who is a global expert on the integration and healing of trauma, both individually and at a collective level. And so I've studied closely with Thomas for almost 6 years now. And he really opened my eyes to understand how trauma is the environment in which we really live. Most of us would not, if I were to ask most people, are you traumatized? They would say, no, I'm not traumatized. But our reality is that we've been born into a traumatized world. There's nowhere, no geography that's exempt from it. We've had wars, colonization, genocides, all sorts of things that have affected us. And through Thomas's work, I came to see how that experience of trauma is so ingrained in us. And for the most part, we're not really consciously aware of how it's motivating us. So I brought together these two fields, my interest in money and how it's playing out in our lives and how to make our financial experience one where we feel confident, competent, at ease with it. And then this understanding of trauma that's driving us, because for the most part, it's unconscious. We'll see signals of it, fear and anxiety and a sense of scarcity. But unless we consciously choose to look at it, we're probably driven by it without our awareness. So that's the genesis of writing Money Wisdom Unlocked, with the subtitle, Understanding Trauma as a Key to Your Financial Behavior, because I believe that the way in which we relate to money and how we are behaving with it, some of the practices that are not necessarily very helpful to us are really signals to say, look underneath. And find out what happened. And frankly, I think it's a gift, because if we choose to do that, then we can heal it. And we not only transform our relationship with money, but we also heal other parts of our lives. So it's a gift.
So thank you for that. And you introduced me to Thomas Hübl, which was a gift in itself. And it's been a beautiful experience. He's a brilliant, brilliant human being, just a unique, just treasure to the world today in terms of the whole space that you speak to. So maybe we get a little personal. You can tell me to back off if you feel I'm pushing too much.
Okay.
But so the healing part, you open to share of how that healing of being punitive, the word you used in terms of 45% versus, obviously he was wearing the shareholder or majority shareholder hat while you were wearing the daughter hat, right? And you're wearing two hats at the same time, right? We could put it from a outside perspective. I know it's not easy to, easy for me to talk. I'm an outsider, but so what is the meaning? Because, you only control two things in life, right? The meaning you give and your response. So at that time, you took it as a punitive, as a minority shareholder. What is the meaning you give today? Or did you shift to be able to let go and move on? And how was Thomas able to help you, or whoever it was that, or yourself?
I was fortunate that I've had some really exceptional teachers over the years. So I'm very happy that I connected with Thomas about 6 years ago. And he's helped to build on some other groundwork, excuse me, that I had already done, because I think money is a lifelong teacher.
Yes.
And I don't think this journey is ever going to end in our lifetime, my lifetime for sure.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to use this experience to keep on unraveling it and unpacking it. And the piece with my dad that I think is really important for all of us, it doesn't matter what the level of wealth is in our families, but when we're in a family of wealth, these issues tend to get amplified, is the tension that we all experience between becoming who we are destined to be and belonging to our family of origin. And some families, especially when there's a lot at stake, will want to manage how their next generation behave, present, and evolve. And as I now come to see it, my dad had expectations of me that I did not fulfill. I was on my path, not his path for me. And so that tension grew. And by the time it came to me being bought out of the businesses, I was told at a later date by my mom, but you left. It was like, I left the family. I was no longer a member. And my dad was always very clear about money. You should keep it in the family. So now I can see how that arose. But I think it's, my own experience of it, I think can be valuable for others. It's like, how do I become and not get constrained by the expectations that go with belonging, and at least explain my becoming to my family.
So that's I guess the yin and yang of the me and the we, right? So you're talking about full expression of self, yet maintaining belonging in the family, which comes with impositions, expectations, and then judgments of you left me or you left us or whatever it is, which then has financial implications in your case and in many cases, right? So it's that dance of the yin and yang, we call it the me and we, right? And how you play it or work it, and how it limits us or provides complete absolute possibility, right? It's kind of, you've got the incredible foundation, but it comes with strengths. In
the optimal situation, the family recognizes that the more complete and evolved each individual member becomes, the bigger, better, stronger the family is.
Exactly.
But again, the limitations would be because there's some drive, probably driven by trauma, that would cause the family to have some limitations in that regard.
All right, beautiful. So now that we have a background and the energy, so so let's go back to financial behavior. So maybe let's summarize. What are the key influencers that you have seen? And I know it's in the article, and we're going to share it with everyone that will receive this. So what are the key influencers of financial behavior that you feel are very important to highlight? I mean, trauma is a big word, and some people will be triggered by that word because they think it's got to be dramatic, right? And remarkable. And there's a lot of, subconscious trauma and bleed through generationally, which you speak to in the article. So what would you say are the key ones that would be very important for us to really kind of reflect on and introspect, and maybe journal for those who, love to journal?
Sure. So obvious education and experience is readily apparent. So the image that I like to use is that of an iceberg floating in the sea. So if you look at what's above the surface, that's typically our financial cognitive intelligence or our financial IQ skills. Okay. And that's what we are most readily taught, whether it's in our families, in our school, in our education. And that would be everything from the most basic level of where does the money come from and go to, and do I budget appropriately, getting more sophisticated, how do I invest smartly, and how do I optimize my tax situation. That would all be financial IQ. That's what we'd see above the surface of the iceberg, and that's what people would typically name as a financial skill set. But then I would also say that we have financial emotional intelligence, or financial EQ. And I would think of that as being at the surface of the water. So it's
surface of the water, not below, just the surface. Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of at the surface. Okay. And it's not as readily apparent because we're just embodying it, but we know when it's really functioning because it makes financial transactions go smoothly. And we're not taught it overtly in the same way that we are the financial IQ skills. So the EQ skills we pick up. We watch our parents, we see our teachers, we know what they are or are not doing with money. So for example, did we see our parents fighting over money, or who paid the bills in the household?
Who controlled the purse?
How were financial decisions made?
Yeah.
That will all play into our financial EQ and our awareness about money. It's an incredibly important skill. I think it's equally determinative of success, but it's not as equally appreciated, I think, as financial IQ.
So is there a time frame? Like a lot of times your characters, they talk about 0 to 7. Is there a time frame, or is this throughout your time at home that you build this EQ that you're
it's not just at home. I mean, you know, be influential teachers, who knows?
Okay.
I would not limit it, because we're always shaping that. It's what we're observing and what we're experiencing, and the money messages that we get given and that we then pass on, and what sense we make out of them. So that's what my book, True Wealth, that I wrote 6 years ago was about. It was all about financial EQ, which I would describe as how money affects us, how it changes our relationships, so how other people relate to us because of money, how we talk constructively about money. And I think that effective communication is the first and best line of defense in any challenges around money. How we negotiate over money, and how we resolve conflicts over money without resorting to legal means. So that's all the financial EQ, massively important, but not as overtly apparent as the financial IQ, which is why I said it's at the surface of the water. But underneath the water, we've got the bulk of the iceberg. And that is where there's all sorts of unconscious and hidden drivers. And I would say that a dominant one is trauma, of which we are, for the most part, unaware. We may get a sense of it because we may have anxiety or fear about something, and you know, wonder to ourselves, what's the origin of that? But for the most part, we don't look at it very consciously. And what I always say to the clients that I work with is, I want you to make your decisions consciously. So let's look at why you're making these decisions and how you arrived at them.
So you talk about the subconscious drivers, and the subconscious drivers, you're saying, are being impacted by trauma. Can we unpack that? Like, what does trauma mean, and what does it look like for somebody who doesn't understand or cannot?
Yeah. So you already alluded to the fact that there are multiple categories of trauma, and I have them in the article. And there are 3 dominant ones. One is individual. So it could be ill health, as you experienced, accidents. It could be inadequate nurture when we were young. So we have grown up with a sense of scarcity. There's just not enough love to go around, whatever. So there's individual trauma. There's collective trauma, when a whole group of people experiences the same overwhelming situation. And trauma is the response in our body to an overwhelming situation. So when a group of people experiences it, it could be, as we're now seeing playing out in Ukraine, a war. It could be a climate catastrophe, wildfires ripping through a town. You know, there are any number of collective traumas. And then there's also ancestral trauma, what is passed down to us through the generations. And I was sharing about this article with one of my neighbors here in Switzerland, and he said to me, Diana, come into my apartment. So I was like, great. So I went in, and he flung open the pantry door, and he said, this is what hoarding looks like, because it was packed with things. And
so he's getting worried about the cyber attack in Switzerland.
No. I knew him well enough to know that he and his wife, both of their families, had lost relatives in the Holocaust. And so the outcome was that they were making sure that they had whatever resources they were going to need. And he said also that this expression was also evident in their children. You know, so this was passed down through generations, and they were living it out. That's an example of ancestral trauma. And I think it's super interesting, because we talk so much about passing wealth down. through the generations, but we don't talk very much about the other things we're passing down.
But then again, you got the DNA and you have the epigenetics, right? So this is bleed through you're speaking to, and the DNA is a potential expression and the epigenetic is the choice of expression. But here it's clearly being expressed, and you're saying in this family, that expression has gone even to their children, right? Because that's what they saw in their home. But how did he share, if you don't mind? Like what he showed you, he said, this is my expression of my, bleed through family.
Oh, he was very transparent. He was very aware of it.
But how was his emotion? Was he sad? Was he, or just, he was,
I would say that he was certainly obviously conscious and just accepting for what it was.
Okay. So he was at peace that, look, this is.
I didn't take the conversation with him any further, so I don't know. Okay. But definitely acceptance, recognition. This is what it is. This is what it's meant. This is how it's impacted us and our family. Yeah. Wow. And that's just a lovely example of, well, lovely in the sense of it's beautifully illustrative of how epigenetic ancestral trauma is passed down through the generations. And for the most part, we really don't recognize that.
So now you've shared three pieces, right? The individual, the collective, and then obviously the generational bleed through, right? That you speak about. Now, as you share, like this, obviously neighbor was very open. He invited you in, he showed you the pantry, and it's like, look, and he's showing the expression of the, generational bleed through, right? Through the experience of Holocaust in the family. So as you're sharing, right, with, you were in London, you're meeting people and you continue to meet people. What is being accepted and what is being resisted in these three spaces that you spoke to? Is there anyone that is more embraced by families or readers or more resisted? Or do you feel that it's kind of not as obvious?
I wouldn't say that the response is just, a blanket response. It depends with whom I'm talking, and it depends on their own sort of perspective. So I know that the word trauma is a challenging word for some people, and as you've already said, and that there is a difference between what I write about in the article of small T traumas and big T traumas. Most of us just think if you haven't had a big T trauma, you're not traumatized, but small T, chronic, ongoing situations can really impact us. And when I have a moment to unpack it for people and explain it, and then make it really concrete in some of our financial behavior, then there is a much greater appreciation of it. I had one person who was looking at it and initially was quite resistant, but then just sitting with it was able to accept the reality of it and came back and said, okay, now I get it. There's a couple of behaviors. It's been very interesting to me because this article came out a month ago. And I've been sharing it widely. And there are two of the behaviors that I have detailed as ones that are not necessarily helpful to us. One of which is using money to control other people and to try to address our own sense of insecurity. And a number of—
Do you mind saying the second one again? Trying to control our sense of insecurity. I think we need to hear it again, because that's, controlling others we hear a lot, but that second piece is the driver, that subconscious driver that we tend to forget. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted all of us to hear it again.
No. Yeah, and insecurity around scarcity, whatever it happens to be. So that seems to be something that plays out very regularly in families, that money is used for control. And I write in the article that it would be so much better if we were to be focused on the quality of our relationships with our family members and not what the money is going to do or achieve, certainly in terms of how it gets passed down. So that's a big one. And another one that is obvious, but was a little surprising to me, was difficulty receiving. So
Okay.
I think, you know, this could be compounded by the fact that the people that I have been talking to about this are mainly significantly wealthy. And so they're not used so much to receiving, but to giving. And when we receive, as Thomas Hübl has taught me, we can feel inferior, younger, regressive, and that we don't deserve to receive. And that we don't deserve the generosity that's coming toward us. So if we are challenged to receive something that is generous, then that's a really good access point into looking at why am I not comfortable to receive? Why am I not equally comfortable to receive as I am to give?
I'll share a little story if you don't mind. So I was about to do a talk in Davos, and I was with one of my masters, and I'm about to go on stage, and he says, "Feisal, you're a selfish human being." I was like, "What?" Right? And there's a room full of entrepreneurs and philanthropists. And he says, "You're a selfish human being." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm about to go on stage. Like, what are you doing?" And he says, "Tell me how it feels to give." And I said, "It's the greatest feeling on earth. It's so like incredible. It's like the high of highs." He's like, "Okay, how good are you at receiving?" And then the penny dropped. You know, I just went down and I said, "Well, work in progress." He goes, "Let's be honest, you suck, right? And cancer forced you to learn to receive because it incapacitated you. And it was forcing you to learn a lesson that clearly you haven't learned." So he goes, "You see, you're so selfish that you don't want others to have that incredible feeling that you get to experience every time you give." And I was like, bingo. So I'm just adding to, you know, accelerate that or accentuate what you just shared. And, you know, we're really, when we're doing the work, self-care and self-love, wow, it's a project for all of us and a work in progress.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead. I just thought I'd.
No, that's a great story. And I'll back onto it with one of my own, which ties together a number of these themes. So one of the money messages that I got from my dad, one of them was never be in debt. And the second one was always be the first to pay for something. So if you're out for dinner, you pay first, you buy the first round of drinks, you do whatever it is.
Okay.
And that was so powerfully ingrained in me that if I was out for dinner with friends, I would offer to pay.
Okay.
And it was not until I was, I think, in my 40s, when one of my friends said, "You know, Diana, I don't like it when you do that. It's distancing. I don't like it." And so I was like, okay. So that caused me to stop and look at that piece of behavior and go, what is it in me? Because it's controlling.
Yeah.
You know, and not only does it mean that other people can't participate, but it means that I don't let other people give to me. So I've had to use that as one of my unpacking pieces. And you know, these things, like, how do we split bills when we go out for dinner? We can learn so much from our behavior around that if we choose to look at it.
I like the first one, not being in debt. But again, I'm Gujarati, so maybe at least that one I love that he gave you. But I completely agree, right? That, and especially when you're going on dates, right? That can become, I'm not talking, you know, that can become very challenging for those who are going on a date and they're, you know, the first reaction is to pay, right? Irrespective of gender, could become, you know, in today's world, pretty challenging, right? That response. So in terms of resist.
Let me just say though, Feisal, the one about never be in debt, that's interesting too, because it's apparently so good on the surface. And what my dad obviously meant was don't be in credit card debt. You know, it's like,
okay, so not the debt that's financially scandalous in terms of
right. But what it did for me was, I remember the first time I took out a mortgage when I was in my mid-20s, and it was painful to sign those papers because everything in me said, this is debt, you should never be in debt. And yet it was a smart investment move. So,
tax-wise,
you know,
in all realms.
Right. So we need to like take these money messages apart and say, does this work for me? Do I want to continue it? Do I want to change it, or do I want to stop it?
Yeah.
We have choices. And I think if we as individuals, and especially parents, can start looking and going, what money messages am I giving to my kids? Are these the ones I want to give to them? Or are they just unconsciously what I'm passing on?
Yeah. But do they really understand? Like you said, like I even reacted positively, but then you reframed it. And I completely agree with you that that's a general concept is good, right? Where you borrow, like even we were at trade finance, but we borrowed because that's what you needed to do, because you can't run trade finance without massive banks, right? But you had money on the side to repay if something happened. So whatever you borrowed, you had cash on the side, right? It could be in your personal account, but it was there. So you're still borrowing and you're in debt, but net, you're not. And I think the message is, I think he's referring to, or, yes, the credit card and the net, right? So that's kind of what, but again, to unpack that and be conscious of what you share and how you share it, because it can be construed in a way that's, like I did, right? I said, it's great, but then you corrected me and gave that example, and that guilt, right? That, you feel terrible, right? Inside going, wait a minute, am I doing something fundamentally against, my value and my identity? Because that's what probably felt like, right?
Right. It did. That first mortgage, really painful.
So now in terms of, so you're saying that once you're sitting with the people, you're unpacking, you're creating context, but what have you experienced, or an example where there was just absolute resistance? Was there any one that was just like, no, Dana, I'm not with you? Like, have you experienced that in the last month or so, that anybody just pushed back really surprisingly hard because it was so painful for them?
No, I haven't. Okay. That doesn't mean to say that someone who reads it may not have that reaction. I've had more curiosity, actually. I've had people going, oh, this is really interesting. I hadn't ever thought about this, so I like that it's triggering curiosity. And that leads me to say that there are two hallmarks, I think, in my work. One of them is curiosity. So I'm very curious about my clients. What is it that shaped them to be who they are today? And I quote Oprah Winfrey in the article, because when she was talking about early childhood education, she basically said the question we should be asking is not what's wrong with this child, but what happened to this child. So that's the stance that I like to take. It's like, let's be curious, what shaped this life? And then express compassion, because all of us are doing the best that we can in our circumstances. So those are like the twin pillars, I would say, of what I do.
I mean, because why I asked that question, because sometimes when we are doing the work we do with the relationships and the mental emotional health, there's some pieces that are so traumatizing that they don't want to go there, right? So that's why I was asking if there is a deep-rooted, experience individually, right? That, and when I say collectively, I mean even the household had that money was such a pain point that they're really struggling to even start to address it, which I know Thomas would do a great job. But so that's why I asked if there's any expression coming out.
Well, I would say a couple of things in response to that. When something is really deeply traumatizing, it's wise to get professional help. And I am not a psychologist. I am not a trauma therapist. I'm a wealth mentor. And so I always point my clients to getting additional professional support, because these are really painful issues that they need a strong container and relationship to go through. So that's one piece of it. The second is that it's interesting to me that we've got underlying traumas that could have been shaped in any number of ways. But then in addition, on top of that, we've got what I would think of as money traumas. So, for example, my inheritance experience could count as a money trauma. It's not a trauma related to, my growing up years or whatever. It's an express use of money to create a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And so I see that there are two brackets, and the overt money traumas are the easier ones for us to identify and go in this space of financial awareness and mentoring, because they're the ones that we're bringing to the table. This happened, it wasn't fair, etc.
Oh, but it's interesting as you were sharing, I'll tell a story very short again, where whenever we asked my dad, why don't we have a sister? Because we never had a sister. And we kept asking, and he would come back and say, do you know how much it costs to raise a child? Right? And as a teenager, it was really, like, for me, like, really unacceptable, to be very honest, right? And I remember sitting in my bedroom in the Congo, calculating how much money I owed my father for raising me, and calculating how long it will take and by when I would actually pay him back, right? And that's from him just saying, and I'm asking, why don't we have a third sibling? Because it's two boys, right? And we always wanted a sister, and okay, now my cousins are my sisters, but, and that was his response. And look at the reaction that happened to a 14, 15-year-old, right? That's actually took out a paper and calculated to the T, including university, and then graduating and, doing the math forwards to be able to repay. So, I'm not saying that I'm so mindful of maybe what comes out of my mouth and my kids are thinking or feeling or doing, but just that little comment, and look at the impact, right?
Faisal, I'm just smiling here because our paths are so parallel in certain ways. So I had one of those moments about cost, and the only exam I've ever failed in my entire life was grade 3 piano.
Oh, wow. You failed.
I failed grade 3 piano.
Okay. At least you got an F, Diana.
We're proud of you. I had a piano teacher who just, I didn't respond to. Anyway, I remember talking to my mother about it afterwards. And these were private piano lessons. I was at boarding school, and I remember her saying to me, "You've been very expensive."
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, and it was like, I have to pass every exam to justify, the money that has been spent on me. And it was a deeply powerful message. You've been very expensive. Was I worth it? Was I worthy? So, exactly. Yeah.
And then in the book, one of the chapters is, am I good enough? And from your wealth mentoring, that's unfortunately a question driving many of us as next gens, which is really sad, requires reframing. And I know that you do a beautiful job at helping people move that piece of worthiness, right? And reframe it, because it's not a healthy driver, right? Or story that drives your life. So yeah, you're very expensive. Wow. That's, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And what you're saying about being worthy ties us back into Thomas's work, because he would say, we all have a universal birthright to be, become, and belong, and we are worthy inherently.
Yeah. Be, become, and belong. Beautiful. Beautiful. So now we're going to go to a little more positive space where you talk about money in flow, right? Yeah. And obviously in the old tradition is you need to keep the money flowing, right? Because you need to get the economy flowing, and it's always, you give and it comes back, right? And always you don't hoard, you don't hold, right? You let it flow. So what does that mean, and how can we learn to maybe continue in that space or accelerate it or whatever? What does that mean? Help us unpack that.
Yeah, and thank you for being so clear about the fact that money is designed to be in flow, because I say in the article that if we hold it and it stagnates, that's not good for us or for the larger society. Yeah. So we, as I already said, we want to make all of our decisions consciously, so we know what's driving us. So to do that, we first pay attention to any triggers that might give us an indication of what is driving us. That could be fear or anxiety or a sense of scarcity, and get the help that we need, as we've just been saying, to unpack that. And some of that requires centering in ourselves, because to keep money in flow, we want to be making conscious choices that are aligned with who we truly are. So if we can center in our bodies, be present to ourselves, that can require some potential breathing practices and certainly slowing down, because most of us move way too fast. But if we can do that and really sense ourselves, then we have the opportunity to make our financial choices in alignment with our true nature. Okay. And then it will be clear to us where the money should flow. I mean, one obvious choice that people have is, how much money do I pass on to my family of origin, and how much do I give in philanthropy and in other forms of generosity? Yeah. And the more that we are connected to ourselves, the more we're going to feel connection to the larger human family. And therefore, the more our definition of family will expand. And so the more likely we are to actually gift more broadly. I am not arguing against passing wealth down to your next generation, but I am arguing for a more, a broader definition of who's in your family.
Yeah. So when you talk about centeredness, right? You're talking about that centeredness, making conscious choices, embodying, the inner wealth piece that you speak to, right? In both the book and the piece you've just written. How do we go into that process? Like, what does that mean? I know people do values exercises and things like that. Can you walk us through, how would one look at, what is my state of my inner wealth? Like, do you have a process or something you can share? Just a few guidelines?
I would, what's the state of my inner wealth is a really big question. So I mean, that's,
you're in Switzerland, you're getting great air in the mountains, so I'm taking advantage of that clarity, Diana.
Yeah, well, I would say that the first step is really embodiment. And once we slow down enough to listen to our bodies, it's apparent that they're signaling to us, but we're missing most of the signals most of the time because we're moving too fast. So if we can slow down then and listen, our bodies are going to tell us an awful lot. And that's just the first step in appreciating who we are. What our inner wealth is a fairly complex ongoing journey beyond that. But that's the first step, is being able to slow down and listen and receive from our body. Because if we do it all in our heads can turn us into pretzels and take us in any direction, right? We can justify things from any number of angles. We're clever with our minds. But our bodies are going to tell us the truth.
So you're speaking about, like, what I talk about as well, the unity of head and heart, but you're talking full embodiment, right? That we truly listen to the intuition, to slow down and attune, right? As they say, right. Internally. And you feel that from that exercise and practice, we will learn to exercise that muscle and build that muscle to make better choices as we move through relating to money, right? And how about, and even the triggers, I guess, right? Slowly, the triggers will start to become more apparent, but we'll be able to choose to reframe and give different meanings. Is that what I'm hearing? Or am I missing something?
Yes. And we'll also have a broader sense of ease because we'll be more at home in ourselves. It's not just about the money, it's about being at home. And I can share a couple of things from my own experience, that it's not necessarily that in any given moment I will go, oh, this is really, I'm feeling so much freer right now in this moment because I'm embodying and being present to myself. But I've had a couple of experiences recently. So I have a young friend who's an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, and he was telling me about a project that he's established. And he was telling me how much passive income he's getting from it, which is a very significant amount of money. And as he was telling me this, I had this moment where I had a choice point. I could either be envious that he was generating that much passive income, or I could celebrate his success. And what this embodiment practice has done for me, and I'm not an expert at it, I consider myself still a beginner here. But what it did for me was it allowed me to slow down enough that I could catch that decision point. And instead of going straight into envy, I could go, oh, you've got a decision here.
Yeah.
And I could choose to celebrate.
Okay. So what I'm hearing now is, now I get it. So it's creating that space between being reactive and responsive, right? So when there's a space, you respond, right? When there's no space, you react. And that's through the meditative process. So you're speaking of the same thing, but relating to the embodiment to support the money elements of the piece. Okay, now I get it. Okay, and how did that, and how did that feel? Were you able to like reframe it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was able to choose the celebration. And, I looked at it and went, Diana, in the past, you could easily have been envious. And isn't this great that this journey has taken you to being able to celebrate? But there was no precise moment in the journey when that happened. It's just the fruit of doing it that got me there. And it also showed me how close I could be to going
the other way. And it doesn't mean it could happen. It could happen in a conversation this afternoon where you do go there, and it's okay, and you learn from it, right? Because at least now you have the awareness that you recognize it and say, what happened this time that was different from last time? Okay.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And then sometimes things just happen where I can look at it and go, gosh, 5 years ago, I would have reacted quite differently. I would have felt fear. I would have been anxious, whatever. And now this thing just happened and it really hasn't fazed me. So it's just progression that every so often I can go, oh, that feels really good. I am so happy that that's the way it is.
So we're going to loop back to how you started. And again, feel free to push back if you don't feel. The article, have you sent it to your sister and had any feedback? No,
I haven't.
Haven't sent it or haven't got feedback?
Neither.
Okay. Sorry, I crossed the line. We can.
No. I will tell you that I did send my book 6 years ago to my sister, one of my sisters, and I never got any feedback. And my best guess is that she put it on a shelf and never read it. So, and had she read it, I think she would definitely have given me feedback. So,
the same one that you sold your shares to, is it the same one or a different?
No, it's the other one.
The other one. Okay.
Yeah, but so no, I haven't sent them the article. Yeah.
Okay.
Now you've provoked me to think whether I will.
Part of the healing journey. Thomas sent me a note and said, poke Diana on this topic. No, I'm kidding. He would not do that. But no, because the thing is that for many of us, right? Like I wrote the book and it was interesting to see that it was on coffee tables in family homes, right? And it was interesting where visitors would come and stay in those homes and they would be the first ones to read it, while it sat there already for a year, right? And I watched these pieces because I could tell, I gift the hardcovers like you have, and at times it's like, wow, here you have somebody in your family where very few have ever written a book, right? and you haven't bothered to even open it, right? And sometimes it hurts, but I guess, it's, as they say, right? They will when they're ready, or maybe they never will, and so just wanted to ask how, because it's our healing, right, that comes with it. But again, it's their choice, right? How they perceive it. But that's amazing. So now, what else is in the article or otherwise that we haven't touched upon that you'd like to share as we move towards the end of our time together? Is there other pieces that I didn't touch on or that we didn't talk about?
No, I think we've done a pretty thorough job of it. I would just say that I focus only on the money behaviors that are challenging to us, as opposed to the ones that are going really well, because that's where the learning can happen. And so, we're looking at greed and hoarding and lying and hiding and wasting and allowing money to dominate our lives, any of those things. And some people will respond and say, I've got all of those. And some people will just have one. But my hope is, my goal is that this article is a source of healing. I want it to be broadly available. I believe that conceptually it's really accurate. And so I've made it freely available. It's a downloadable PDF. People can get it off my website. And because I just want the information out there, because I think it could be helpful, both individually and at a larger society level.
No, thank you. Thank you for your generosity of taking the time, working with Thomas, who's a brilliant human being and a gift to mankind. But I would love to add one other piece where I think that what it will do is bring that curiosity and actually the, confidence to bring some of those topics to the dining table, right? And that's what happened when some of the next gen read, my book, or they read other books, right? Where they are able or willing to have that conversation now, because from them, it's Uncle Feisal or, Auntie Diana wrote this, right? Or, become talking younger people, right? And they're able to bring that, and gives them a reason, right? An opportunity, I would say, not a reason, to have that conversation, which I think is beautiful, because some of those words could be very triggering, right, to the founding generation, or the generation that's about to pass on the wealth. And also I feel that a lot of the bankers, right, that are now, or the multifamily offices that are dealing with the largest transition of wealth, right, for them to understand in their trust structures or in the pieces that they're watching, why some of those behaviors are happening, right? They'll probably have an education from that piece that you've written as to, oh, I never thought of that. Yeah, now that makes sense. I see where Diana's coming from. Wow, we always joke, I have an uncle who always tells me that I was born with a golden spoon. And I always remind him it's a diamond spoon. And he said he was born with a wooden spoon. I said, no, you were born with no spoon, right? Because, because of the comments, right? That I'm third gen, my father at least gave us a loan to start a business. They didn't have that, right? And so they have this comparative. But again, with that founding gen comes the fear of losing it all, right? That fear is still there, right? Which many carry to this day. While our gen, I'm not saying I'm out of that, but our gen has a little bit more, centeredness to losing it, right? I always tell the boys, I say, better they can take everything, but they can't take you. And I've had my own roller coaster ride, financially, health-wise, as you know, relationally, the whole 9 yards. And I always say, they can take everything but you, right? And in this case, you're speaking to that, and it's beautiful. But so I think there's a lot more conversations, at dinner, at lunches, in bankers' rooms, in trust structures, advisors, that will take the piece that you've, put your heart and soul into, to share, that will give them, as you say, through curiosity, a different conversation, perspective, and maybe they will ask some questions without, putting crossing the boundaries like I did with my last one about your sister and sharing the article. I'm sorry if I rubbed you the wrong way. I apologize.
Not at all. Truly fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I like what you're saying, Feisal, that essentially it's normalizing things. So no one needs to feel like, you know, I'm an exceptionally poor person at dealing with money. It's like these issues are throughout the population. And so by normalizing it, it makes it possible for us to own what's ours and then heal it.
It becomes universal, right? And it's okay. It's no longer taboo, right? Even using the word trauma with the money might change the perspective of trauma. And that, wait a minute, okay, it doesn't have to be those extreme situations. Diana is talking about it in these other situations. And it doesn't have to be that Holocaust or colonization or whatever, but it could be just, you know, you're expensive, or you know how much it costs to raise a child, right? All these little, comments that were made in all good heart and good spirit, right? Because they love you. But the meaning we gave as teenagers, I assume you were a teenager at the time as well, was a little bit different, right? And we need to reframe that, and we have, and we've let go, hopefully, in that space. So Dan, thank you. I'd like, any few words or anything that you want to re-emphasize for us to, rethink or reflect on, or homework. Why don't you give us a little homework?
Thank you, Feisal. I guess the easiest homework is for someone to write what I would call your money autobiography.
Okay.
Look at your storyline and through the lens of money, from when you were zero and what your experiences were as a child. So I already alluded to some of that. Did you see your parents fighting over money, who made decisions? What happened when you, bought your first car? How did that feel? And just go back and look at everything over a long trajectory and see what you can see, what the arc is and what the repetitive patterns are, because that will be the first beginning clues to your money journey.
And you just do it in free flow? Do we just do it in free flow, or is there a structure that we can send them with the webinar?
I can give you an outline. A guidelines for doing it. So let me share that with you, and I'm happy for that to be shared. It's in the appendix of my book, and I have it as a separate PDF. So I'm glad to share.
If you don't mind, yeah. So what we'll do is we'll share the article. I call it a paper or a book because it's 51 pages. I don't know. Article seems a bit too light, and then we'd love to share the PDF of the appendix from the book so that we can see and try to kind of look through it, right, and say, okay. And see how much of that we're playing out and how much of that we're repeating. And then hopefully we may choose differently so that our families and our, children or siblings or whoever, have a different experience than we did.
Yep.
So
Feisal, can I just show it? Here it is.
Of course. Okay, beautiful.
It got printed up. So
oh wow, okay. I've only seen the digital, so thank you. That's my first as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
beautiful.
And it is broadly available just on my website, dianachambers.com. So
okay, perfect. So thank you, Diana, for your time. Thank you for your generosity and for sharing and for the vulnerability of the personal stories, throughout, and the experiences you had with your neighbor and your own father and your sister and beyond that. And again, thank you for taking the time, to work with Thomas and all the other beautiful people I remember speaking about when you did the nonprofit in the US and what he taught you. And it was really, really, life touching and incredible. So once again, thank you. Thank you everyone for being with us. I hope we were able to share a few things, and I look forward to hearing about the autobiography that they write, and hopefully get some feedback, and we'll loop back to you, Diana. And of course, if anybody wants to connect with Diana, I mean, we'll have the website on there, and you can contact me and I can contact her, or we can do it directly. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Diana, and see you soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.